philosophy and thought. Part 2, From Wonder to Understanding. The initial dawning of wonder before the immense power of nature marked a turning point. That is, there begins to be a questioning of the natural forces. What began as a relationship of awe, bewilderment, and subordination gradually evolved into a yearning for comprehension, into an attempt to obtain answers to better understand these forces and what they can do to humans. Early thinkers recognized the capricious nature of these forces, their capacity to both harm and benefit humanity. This realization fueled attempts to probe and scrutinize this relationship through questions and issues posed to these forces. As the relationship with nature evolved, a pivotal shift occurred. The personification of natural forces. This personification, transforming them into supermen and superwomen, who will then be the gods and goddesses, likely stemmed from a desire to reframe the relationship. By imbuing these forces with human-like qualities, an avenue for dialogue and understanding potentially opened. Thus, the Greek pantheon emerged, with each deity embodying a specific aspect of the natural world: Zeus wielding the thunderbolts, Poseidon commanding the seas, Demeter nurturing the earth. This personification provided a more tangible framework for human engagement with the otherwise abstract forces of nature. Now, the gods and their corresponding tales begin to interfere with humans. This interference is determinant of the relationship that human beings have with the gods, and it can be summarized as: it is necessary for the Greek man to always keep in mind that he is before the gods. What does it mean to be before the gods? It means that I and my mortality, my finitude, my limitations, I am before immortality, and therefore it is not appropriate to question the superiority of the gods in relation to humans. So, this means that there is this constant awareness of human limitations and mortality in contrast to the gods' eternal nature. Consequently, any notion of challenging their superior status was not merely inappropriate, but unthinkable within the established social and religious framework. And then, what followed was that, instead of absolute obedience, absolute determination, or preordained fate, the relationship between humans and gods rested on a fundamental discernment that the human being must always have: that we are before that which surpasses us, and therefore we must behave, conduct ourselves according to our inferior condition, our mortal condition, and the condition of the gods who are powerful and immortal. So, again, now humans must maintain a constant recognition of one's own limitations and mortality before the vast power and immortality of the divine. This awareness shaped an appropriate conduct, emphasizing a behavior befitting a mortal existence in contrast to the gods' eternal and powerful nature. Gods, now conceived in the image of humans, but much more powerful and with a greater power, a wider latitude of influence over the destinies of men. Yet, their own realm was not devoid of turmoil. They navigated complex relationships, experiencing both conflict and favor, often with direct repercussions for mortals. The Trojan War serves as a fascinating case study of divine intervention and its impact on human affairs. While the confederation of Greek cities waged war against Troy, the Olympian pantheon itself was divided. Certain deities favored the Trojans, while others championed the Greeks. This divine discord manifested in active interference throughout the episodes of the war, influencing events and outcomes. Ultimately, Zeus, the supreme god, sided with the Greeks, ensuring their eventual victory. Now, the mortals, they behave in relation to the gods and the gods observe. This is a factor of great anguish for the Greek man. The mortal is always under the eyes of the immortal and is always being judged in some way by them. It is curious to note that while the gods observed and ultimately judged human actions, they did not directly interfere in the destinies of creatures, nor did they rigidly predetermine their destinies. This bestowed upon mortals a measure of agency, allowing them to assume responsibility for their conduct. Though rewards and punishments awaited, divine intervention wouldn't dictate every choice. Consequently, within the ever-present gaze of the gods, a degree of human freedom existed. This awareness of both divine observation and personal responsibility fostered immense pressure for discernment in humans in order to conduct themselves in all aspects of life. This discernment, this way of being before the gods, is called wisdom or sapience. He is wise who, aware of being before the gods, conducts himself in accordance with his condition, and in accordance not with the will of the gods, but with what the gods expect of a hero. To be wise, then, meant conducting oneself with the utmost awareness of this relationship with the divine. It wasn't simply about obeying capricious wills, but rather living up to the virtues and ideals expected of a hero in the eyes of the gods. In the poems of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, we find various heroes that are mortals especially protected by gods. Sometimes they are even demigods, that is, children of the relationship that gods often maintained with humans. In Homer's epics, we find heroes like Achilles and Odysseus, mortals favored by divine parentage or patronage. This proximity to the gods often translated into heightened wisdom and understanding. However, it did not absolve them of personal responsibility. Their actions, their conduct, not simply their lineage, determined their fate. Divine favor or retribution awaited depending on their choices. In other words, they may remain in the condition of heroes, or they may lose the condition of heroes, which is not only a matter of physical strength, courage, and other warrior virtues, but also a situation in which the individual exercises his wisdom in relation to himself and to others. And many heroes falter, right? Let's take the episode of Achilles, for instance, who, angered by the actions of the supreme commander of the Greek warriors, Agamemnon, breaks ties with him and withdraws his men from the war. It was an extreme situation. It was, let's say, an exaggerated act. He was later advised to return and resume his heroic status, but many times heroes go through this type of situation. They find themselves on the verge of losing their status and depend on whether or not they are faithful to wisdom, which is the very heroism that characterizes them. So, situations such as internal struggles and tests of character are always present in the two Homeric poems that narrate the Trojan War, and then the return of the victorious Greeks to their lands, to their cities, to their kingdoms, in order to fulfill the destiny that was marked for them. Parallel to these poems, often with themes drawn from them, we also have the tragedies, which represent in a privileged way the situation of men before fate, before the inevitable. There's a game between freedom and fate, between free will and fate, in how humans embrace their destinies and attempt to fulfill or divert from them. Hence, Greek tragedies like Oedipus Rex and others reveal this, showcasing man facing his destiny, standing before the gods under their gaze, and often trying to dodge his destiny. He will never achieve it, and it is precisely this attempt, which generally fails, that represents a tragic life, a contradictory life that these heroes live in an attempt to assert themselves and their responsibility, their freedom and their responsibility. So, in other words, the tragic hero's attempts to evade their fated paths, ultimately destined to fail, embody the essence of the tragic life, a paradoxical existence marked by the assertion of both individual responsibility and the constraints imposed by fate. Therefore, in Greek culture, there are poems, tragedies, and many other narratives highlighting the privileged presence of gods in everyday life. The gods, due to their semblance with humans, feature prominently in all aspects, all dimensions of life. but primarily in those moments when humans go through decisive situations, that is, their influence was particularly pronounced in pivotal moments, such as the start of wars, the establishment of cities, the codification of laws, and the dynamics of both family and broader social relations. These situations that bear certain extreme characteristics are lived out this way. On one side, human freedom which is never denied to anyone, and on the other side, the fate that must be obeyed. So, what is the human situation? It involves understanding that there's this fatalism, this destiny prescribed by the gods that one cannot deviate from, and to wisely fulfill this destiny. This fatalism. Therefore, navigating this tension becomes paramount. Grasping the reality of preordained fate, while simultaneously striving to fulfill it with wisdom and agency, defines the essence of the human situation in this context. Now, freedom and fate don't oppose each other. From the perspective of Greek religion, they closely connect. The gods advise, suggest, indicate, and signal, but they never force anyone to do anything. And it's for this reason that despite a strong presence of inevitability in Greek culture, life can still be lived with freedom, so long as that freedom is offset or balanced with the responsibility and wisdom incumbent upon every human in conducting their actions. Therefore, exercising this freedom responsibly necessitates an awareness of the potential consequences of one's choices and the cultivation of wisdom in navigating the complexities of life. Greek philosophy will begin with these underpinnings, these attempts to question and answer about the great forces, and especially the fate assigned to each one. This is the primary function of religion and myths. Myths are stories which illustrate episodes we cannot explain. They will always be present in the lives of Greeks, including during the philosophical so-called rational period, because there are always many things beyond our understanding. So, myths, by arranging fables about these situations, provide a response, not a rational response, nor a completely understandable one, but a response which historians often deem oracular. Oracular refers to the oracle. And what was an oracle? It was the voice of the gods transmitted through someone, typically a prophet, a seer or someone privileged to hear the gods, and conveyed to others a message, or some form of warning they should heed. This oracle, or rather, the gods' very speech, was cloaked in mystery, required interpretation, and there were those charged with reading deeper into this message, interpreting it so as to extract from it the most fitting and necessary meaning. In all of this, there is a great cult of mystery. Greek religions are always linked to mystery. The gods themselves live in the face of mysteries. The last word of all questions and all answers is mystery itself. To be before the divine is to be before the mystery. And this requires from the human being a special conduct, a special vision, and a special kind of knowledge, which evidently is not yet science, is not something scientific, but is a certain posture that men must assume to the extent that he is sensitive to this situation. And that is, to be before the gods. Mortals are always in the presence of the gods. This is what defines them. This is what marks the direction of their lives.